What year does the story of America really begin? Most of us are taught it's 1776, or maybe 1620 with a little ship called the Mayflower, but that's like starting a movie an hour in. Before the United States was even a whisper of an idea, this continent was a vibrant, sophisticated mosaic of empires, republics, and sprawling trade routes. The common story we hear is that North America was a virgin wilderness, a vast, empty land, just waiting for European settlers to tame it. But the truth is far more incredible. So let's do a little time travel back to the year. It's 1491. The population of the Americas was likely larger than that of all of Europe at the time. Right here, in what we now call the Mississippi Valley, stood the massive city of Cahokia. It wasn't just a village. It was a metropolis with enormous earthen pyramids and a population of around 20,000 people. To put that in perspective, that's larger than London was during the same period. This wasn't an empty wilderness. It was a continent teeming with life, culture, and complex societies. The story of America didn't start with a blank page. It was written over thousands of pages that came before. So, when did the Europeans actually arrive? Most people immediately think of the British Pilgrims landing at Plymouth Rock, but rewind the clock. The Spanish were here decades, even a century earlier. Let's talk about St. Augustine, Florida. Founded in 1565, it's the oldest continuously inhabited European established settlement in the United States. And it wasn't just a simple fort, it was a complex, multicultural hub where Spanish soldiers, enslaved Africans, and the local Timucua people lived and interacted. It was a messy, complicated, and very real snapshot of the world that was forming long before Jamestown was even a thought. But what about those early English attempts? Before the success of Plymouth, there was the haunting mystery of Roanoke in 1587. You probably know the story. 115 English settlers, including men, women, and children, seemingly vanished from their colony. The only clue they left behind was a single word carved into a post: Croatoan. The popular myth for centuries was that they were all massacred by local tribes. It's a dramatic, tragic story. However, modern archaeology and historical research tell a different, more nuanced tale. Evidence now strongly suggests they weren't wiped out. Facing a record-breaking drought and desperate to survive, they likely moved inland and assimilated with their Native American neighbors, the very people of Croatoan Island. They didn't just disappear. They became part of the existing American fabric. This wasn't a story of extinction, but one of adaptation and survival, a theme that runs deep in American history. They chose to join a community that was already there, rather than perish alone. Now, for a fact that is so often left out of our history books, it feels like a secret. Where did the idea for the United States come from? You know, the concept of multiple, independent states united under one federal government. We're taught it's a stroke of genius from the Founding Fathers, inspired by European philosophy. But what if I told you the blueprint was already here, thriving for centuries? Meet the Haudenosaunee, also known as the Iroquois Confederacy, dates at least the year 1142. Agreed 60 distinct First Nations lived together under a constitution called the Great Law of Peace. This was a sophisticated political alliance that balanced individual tribal power with collective security and decision-making. Fast forward to 1744, as the British colonies were constantly bickering among themselves. An Onondaga leader named Canasatego stood before their representatives in Pennsylvania. He advised them, quite directly, to form a union similar to his own people's confederacy for strength and unity. And they listened. Benjamin Franklin was there, and he later explicitly referenced the Iroquois model when he drafted the Albany Plan of Union. It's an early proposal to unify the colonies. The very concept of we the people, of a representative government made of separate states, has deep, undeniable roots in indigenous governance. The American experiment wasn't invented from scratch. It was inspired by a system that had already proven successful on this very soil for hundreds of years. It's a legacy of political genius that is truly American. And so what was the final straw? Why did the colonists, who saw themselves as proud British subjects, suddenly want out? It wasn't just about a tax on tea. The real catalyst was something bigger: land and money. It all comes back to the 7 Years' War, which Americans call the French and Indian War. After Britain won, King George III issued the Proclamation of 1763. This royal decree forbade colonists from settling west of the Appalachian Mountains to prevent more costly conflicts with Native American nations who lived there. This was a huge problem for a certain group of colonists. Elite land speculators, and this group included men like George Washington, had already laid claim to vast tracts of that very land. They saw it as their path to immense wealth. The King's Proclamation wasn't just a suggestion. It was a direct threat to their financial ambitions. So, the revolution wasn't just a noble fight for liberty. For many of its key players, it was also a fight for the right to expand their territory and their fortunes. Svetse. And what about the Boston Tea Party? We picture patriots protesting high taxes. But here's the twist. The Tea Act of 1773 actually lowered the price of tea. The real issue was a monopoly. The act gave the struggling British East India Company the exclusive right to sell tea directly to the colonies, cutting out the colonial merchants who had been profiting from smuggling and selling it themselves. The famous protest wasn't about the price of tea for the average person. It was about powerful local businessmen, like John Hancock, being pushed out of a lucrative market by a massive corporation with government backing. It was a fight against a bailout, not just a tax. So, when we look back, the real United States was unborn in a vacuum in 1776. It was forged in the collision of three distinct worlds: the ancient, complex indigenous nations who had built civilizations here over millennia, the ambitious and competitive European empires seeking wealth and power, and the resilient African people who were brought here against their will, whose labor and culture would become foundational to the nation. The signing of the Declaration of Independence wasn't the opening scene. It was the explosive climax of centuries of conflict, trade, migration, and cultural blending. America wasn't discovered on an empty continent. It was violently and profoundly transformed from what it had been into something new, something built upon the foundations and the ruins of what came before. History is rarely as simple as a single date on a calendar. Which of these pre-USA facts surprised you the most? Was it the incredible scale of the city of Cahokia, or the Iroquois influence on the US Constitution? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts on these hidden chapters of our history. And if you want to dive even deeper into the real stories they did unteach you in school, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video. Thanks for watching.